Modeling here. This is chapter 3, part 7. I'm starting to lose track myself. Okay, where are we? Okay, so um, we talked about the lost wax method, indirect. So we model it in wax, then we burn that out, and then we pour the bronze. Okay, assembling, different way of working. These beautiful girls, I just love her smile. So these are assembled works. Now, this isn't technically the way you think of assembly, but it does still work where you're doing a bunch of beads on a string. That works, but it's a bunch of already existing objects that you assemble. Okay, so a couple examples here. This would be the Nimba, goddess of fertility. This is a wood carved piece, and then we take we take shells, and this is raffia, same stuff you get at Michael's for basket weaving, and that is assembled around this piece. So we're taking a carved piece, some shells, and raffia, and it's all coming together, so it's assembled. Who really invented assembled work is this guy down here, Joseph Cornell, and he has got all these found objects is what they're called on inside this box. So he takes a picture frame, he puts it over a box, and then he makes little areas of interest where he's got like an existing, maybe a hoop earring or some kind of a shower curtain ring, who knows. And then a little piece of wood here, a glass, which you can't see very well. It's like a little sherry glass with like a shell in it, and a golf ball or some other kind of ball, a little sun that he found. Now, um, if you think back to Picasso, and we don't have a good example of this yet, but Picasso was the beginning of collage, and that is two-dimensional and flat, and he uses newspaper. He invented that in 1915, I believe, 1917, somewhere in there. This is 40 years later. He started working a little bit before this, but at any rate, assemblage, another French word, found objects, happened later. Mixed media is another way of explaining this. So mixed media would also count here. That you don't usually call that mixed media, but that would be found object assemblage. But sometimes people interchange them. Okay, so we're mixing the medias up in this particular piece. Assemblage or ready-made, that's another term. Duchamp used this term. Duchamp is the king of ready-made, and we'll get into him later in the semester. You do want to know about him. But Cornell is the guy who put things in a box. Okay? See how you can see that shell and glass a little bit better here. And then Robert Rauschenberg. Now, these are assemblages. Don't get confused. That word still works, or assembly if we go back. Assembling is the overarching bigger word, and then we get specific into mixed media, assemblage, and then combines. Now, combines are assemblages. I don't care if you use either word, but this is what Rauschenberg called them. Rauschenberg was a painter, abstract expressionist, big deal, and then he kind of shifted into this, made his own thing. He kind of gets his own category. He's one of those people like Picasso. He covers a lot of different areas. So he's also a pop artist. He counts for a lot of things. But he's taking a painting, ostensibly. These get much more three-dimensional later. But he's taking a flat surface, he's painting on it, he's collaging down here, and then he's getting a license plate, some kind of a post from a gate post, tires, a lamp that's flat, and that kind of stuff. So that becomes an assemblage, or as he liked to call them, combined paintings. So he's combining some other elements into it. Fabricated sculpture. Fabrication is still assembling, if that makes sense, because you're putting things together. But fabrication usually uses an industrial and commercial process, such as welding is the most popular one. You can't see the welding very well here, but if you look at this sort of scaffolding rack here, I mean, that's part of it, but there's a lot of welded parts here to hold up this piece. He's also using neon lighting. Now, this is custom made, but it's still a modern fabrication process. So we're still using an industrial process, even though it's not a found object exactly. There's a little bit of confusion there. Okay, so Richard Serra is also a fabricator. Now, none of these are really connected exactly. Actually, I don't know if that's true. I don't know how big these pieces come. He had to get a shipbuilder to make these pieces. He could not find anybody to work this large and bend these beautiful curves that you see here and this sort of diagonal line here. He had to get a shipbuilder because this is basically shipbuilding material. Very expensive, very heavy. Oh, everything about this was difficult. So anyway, he's fabricating with industrial equipment to roll and shape sheet metal. So basically, he's going to the place where they make it and he's explaining to them what he wants, and then he is having a shipbuilder modify it. Okay, so this is a weird oddball thing, and she likes to put those at the end of the chapter. So this is a 3D printed piece, but it's printed out of um, gypsum modules, which is basically plaster. It looks to me a bit harder than plaster, so I don't know if there's some other kind of plastic polymer combined in that plaster. I don't know this worked out well, but I have done some 3D printing. It's usually plastic. It's not usually like this. So these segments, like this whole segment here, I want to assume was 3D printed and that was repeated, and that's how they got connected. This is an old piece of wood, and um, she's sort of playing off these two different old technology, old sort of a way of working, new technology. Okay, but this is done by computer software, and then it's spit out and built up in a 3D printer. Installation work. Now, this is a very old piece. We don't usually call pieces from the no, this is not Baroque. This is the no, this is Baroque. Okay, we don't call this usually um, installation. Let me see if I have a closer one. But it does work in that way. So what happens is this window actually is casting light down here, and we have an existing space here in a church, and so we have rays of light that are coming down here that are manufactured that are it's using this light, but um, it's also incorporating some other materials to make a light source as well. And it's the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa, which has got marble, it's got metal, it's got all kinds of different materials, and it's specifically made for this church. Another installation. This is a little bit more typical, where Matisse, who really felt like he healed in this particular church, he did his paper cutouts and then he did them as stained glass designs, and it's site specific. He made it specially for this church and to fit in these windows, and it casts this light into the room, so that is creating an environment. Dale Chihuly, this is actually in Tacoma, Washington. I got to see this a couple years ago. It's a bridge, and you walk under it, and you look up, and it kind of looks like different sort of sea urchins or different forms from the sea, and this is all glass. This is a very famous installation. This is a little more typical, although the scale of this is really unique to Christo and Jean-Claude. They would do these massive, miles-long things, wrap a whole island with this stuff. They've done all kinds of interesting, huge installations. I don't know how they managed to do all this. It's really wild. They get a lot of volunteers. I do know that, but I mean, it's mind-boggling. So this went for quite a long while. So 2,400 square yards of fabric. So it went 24 miles. Imagine that. 18 feet high. And it was in Sonoma County. And it had, a friend of mine actually lived in that area at that time and saw this piece. Catches the light. But mostly for the case of Christo Jean-Claude, all we have left over is the photos. Performance work is very important in the world of art, and it's not exactly like a dance or a acting sort of a moment. It's a little bit more closer to ceremony or masquerades, if that makes sense. But it's the idea that it's transforming the space. Okay, so technology-based media photography. I'm going to stop here